So there's this idea that you can control your feelings if you control your thoughts. If I understand correctly, that's the central premise of cognitive behavioral therapy. That you feel the way you feel because you think the way you think. It's my belief, it's my understanding that this is fundamentally flawed for a number of reasons. I think logically it doesn't make sense to me. I'm pretty sure that when I was 1 week old, I felt the way I felt because I was tired or cold or hungry or I needed to be held, and it had nothing to do with my thoughts whatsoever. My upset was an experiential process in response to my environment. If I didn't get fed or held or get some sleep, I felt bad and I screamed. And so did everybody else, by the way, not just me. So we feel long before we can think in any recognizable way. I was reading an article in the New York Times this week about anxiety, and it was a woman who had used cognitive behavioral therapy for a very long time, and it hadn't worked with her, and she'd been told to walk her anxiety out the door. Whenever she felt anxious, get up and walk it out. So every 10 minutes she had to get up and walk out the space she was in because she was constantly anxious, and it didn't help. Her anxiety didn't go away. She was diagnosed with a general anxiety disorder. If someone was happy all the time, would you diagnose them with a general joyful disorder? Anxiety is not a disorder. Feeling anxious isn't an illness. I get that chronic anxiety, feeling anxious all the time, is debilitating. And if you want to call it a disorder, call it a disorder. The only thing I think that's really disordered in all of that is our response to feeling anxious all the time, which is to somehow do everything we can to get rid of that anxious feeling and not figure out why we're anxious. Because your body is a really smart tool. Tool? It's not really a tool, is it? Machine? It's not really a machine. It's a really smart organism that has evolved over countless millennia with systems in place to protect you, take care of you, make sure you survive, procreate, etc., etc. The feeling of anxiety, along with all of our other uncomfortable feelings of pain and discomfort and etc. I'm not going to list them all here. Uncomfortable feelings are warning signs letting you know that something is wrong. But the thing that's wrong is not the painful feeling. The painful feeling is the warning sign. It's a little bit like getting a warning light on your dashboard in your car, and you get really upset because that light is blinking and it's upsetting you, so you pull out the fuse so that it doesn't blink at you anymore. When in fact it was just letting you know that your engine's about to fail. This New York Times article, I should really put it up, but I don't have it in front of me. It gave a figure, something like 42 million Americans diagnosed with a general anxiety disorder in the last year, which he said was huge. I don't think it was 42 million, something like that, ballpark, I can't remember the figure. But then in the next sentence, the author said, of course, we're living in unprecedented times and there's an awful lot to be anxious about. And I'm thinking, hold on a minute. So are these people suffering from a general anxiety disorder, a mental illness, or are they living in unprecedented times? Because it can't be both. I mean, if you're in a war zone, I doubt you'll spend much time feeling calm and relaxed. And if that war goes on for years, you might spend years in a state of constant anxiety. You don't have an anxiety disorder, you're in the middle of a war, and it's normal to be afraid. So I would urge anybody who is suffering from anxiety to recognize that they're not suffering from anxiety. They're suffering from being in probably a very unsafe situation. We think that we are really tough, that we can handle and manage anything. We're raised to believe that we should be independent and strong, and especially if you're British, stiff upper lip. Don't complain, don't bother people with your problems, zip it all up, don't seek help, soldier on, push on through, just keep going. But we're not machines. We have a limit. And when you hit that limit, alarm bells will ring. Your body will tell you something's not right. You're in an abusive situation. You're in the middle of a global pandemic. It feels like everything's gone to shit. It feels like the world's going to come to an end. Of course you're anxious. You don't have a disorder. You're just a human being. You're alive, and life right now, and for a lot of people, it's really tough. If you're in the middle of a global pandemic, and perhaps also a horrendous 4 years of a horrendous government, or if you vote Trump, 4 years of a wonderful government, and now it's all about to get horrendous for you. And on top of that, you're in an abusive relationship. Or perhaps you come from a family where you were abused as a child and you haven't had a chance to process that trauma. You're going to feel anxious. And this is another thing about anxiety. The warning light going off, the anxious feeling, it might not be about something that's out here. It might be something that's in here. And if you were traumatized when you were very young, so much so that you disassociated from it, in other words, you repressed that traumatic experience and those feelings, pushed them down because they're too much to handle. You were 2 or 3 or 4 years old, and you didn't have the physiology and the psychology to cope with it, so you repressed it. But it's still there, and it keeps on trying to poke its head out. It keeps on saying this needs to be dealt with. This pain hasn't been resolved. But because that's terrifying, because you don't really know what it is anymore, because you're 20 years on, 30 years on, 40 years on, that feeling, it's kind of coming on the horizon, and actually you can't really tell whether it's an internal thing or an external thing. You might walk into a situation, walk into a room, and somebody across the room is wearing the same perfume as or aftershave that your father wore when he beat you. But you don't really notice that, it's all subconscious. And suddenly you start to panic, and you don't know why you're panicking. And you're panicking because you start to feel that traumatic feeling, but now you think you're in the wrong place. You don't know that it's your trauma. You know, all your feelings are inside your body. It's never coming from the outside, but you might mistake it. Think, oh, somebody's in this room, something's in this room. You're just being reminded of something that you're still carrying around with you. And again, anxiety. I think a lot of the time, a lot of people who are diagnosed with an anxiety disorder just have an awful lot of unfelt feelings inside who are desperately trying to come through. They keep poking their head up, and every time they do, you panic because you can feel something bad's about to happen. Smash it all down, pour a drink on it, some kind of addictive behaviour. Yeah, so what to do about it? Well, I mean, first things first, just recognising what I'm suggesting here. I mean, maybe you don't agree. Maybe you don't agree. That's fine. I'm not a psychologist. I am somebody who has spent many years processing my own traumatic experiences. I have done a lot of work. I've got quite far. Spent a long time in therapy. I'm not there yet. There is no there. But I've managed to re-experience and release quite a lot of traumatic feelings, and I'm generally not anxious, not anymore. I have moments. I think after all of those words, getting all verbose, in a nutshell, anxiety is a warning, letting you know that there is something wrong. Even if it appears that there is nothing wrong, there's something wrong somewhere. So stop trying to get rid of the anxious feeling and start trying to figure out what your anxiety is trying to tell you. Because if you listen to that bit and figure that out, the anxiety will just go away. Once you fix the engine, there's no need for that warning light to flash on anymore. And as I would say to anybody, if you are struggling with anxiety or any other uncomfortable feeling, chronic feelings. By chronic I mean feeling all the time, depressed, fearful. Find someone to talk to about it. because sharing those feelings, and in better, feeling those feelings with somebody and having that person act as a benign, present, non-judgmental, which is the key, witness, has a hugely cathartic effect.